That's
about
awesome.
I actually get us kicked off? And well, welcome everyone to episode 6. We're so excited to join you once again for the Liquid Weekly podcast, co-starring Karl and Taylor, who apparently have the same closet, and welcoming our very first guest today, Ann Thomas. We're so excited to have you, Ann. Hello.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, I am the first guest. That's
You are
exciting.
the
I've,
first
Yes.
I've
guest.
already listened to your first 3 episodes. Can't wait for the next next 100.
Not only are you the first
Ooh.
guest, you're also the first groupie, I guess, and if you listen to all the episodes, right? So
Yeah.
Yes. I'm excited that you're the first guest because that you are actually, we were talking about this a little bit, right? That one of your first podcasts or your first podcast was where you were talking to Kurt and you were talking about Shopify themes. And I think that
Yep.
was the first time that I really heard anybody on a podcast talking about Shopify themes. And so that was great for me. I learned a ton on that episode. So I'm looking forward to asking you a bunch of questions and stuff too. I'm sure you've got some other stuff that you want to talk about already, but I'm pretty excited.
Oh, I could talk about sections and liquid all day. It's a niche topic. So to find two other people
Right.
that actually want to discuss it, here for it.
Yeah.
yeah. Could you give us just like a real quick background, Ann, so folks that don't know you as well as we do, kind of your journey into Shopify and what you do day to day besides helping me with my questions?
Sure, yeah. So I have been in sort of the web development space since 2008. And I originally went to school for art history, completely unrelated, and then sort of transitioned into web development. And I worked for agencies and governments and small companies, big companies. And then I got into Shopify because I was working for an agency and they needed to build a custom theme. So I used Timber. Everyone remembers Timber.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have I found like a forum post where I was asking why an image wasn't being able to be toggled on and off because I didn't understand that you had to have a separate input setting for the checkbox and then use that logic. So that's how little I knew at that point. And then since then, in 2016, I joined out of the Sandbox and was there for about 4.5 years. And then in 2020, I left. And in 2021, I started Design Packs, which is an app. And then I've just been, I don't know, loving Shopify ever since. It's such a great community. Yeah.
That's
It is,
awesome.
it's awesome.
Now, you and I actually met without knowing we met in an actually meeting in 2019. Is that correct? You were at Shopify Unite in Toronto when Trudy was doing her
Yes.
talk?
Yeah, that's right. We were in the same room, but didn't know it. And
That's
there's
so
probably,
sad.
40 people in that room. So
Hanging on her every word. It was a great talk she gave.
yeah, I was sitting next to, I don't know if you know Milk Bottle Labs. They're in
Oh,
Ireland.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I ended up doing some work with Lachlan, and I was sitting next to him at that talk and didn't realize it. So
That's funny.
yeah,
That's
small world.
awesome. I'm disappointed that I never got to go to a Shopify Unite, so y'all just have that over me, and always will.
Tell you,
You
the
could have like a
snacks were
viewing
on point.
party.
It was good.
Yeah, the food was very good, but we should arrange like an in-person viewing party of the online conference that they do. Have it at Red Lobster.
We talked at Red Lobster. Yes, yes.
Ouch.
Well, that's a once a year tradition for me. I don't know if going there more than once, but so we talked about that though when we were talking about the additions option. Some people did do the viewing party, but then it was like 20 minutes long, and so it's like okay, cool, we can just hang out now, But obviously there was a lot more stuff to cover than just the actual like release. Then you spend a whole bunch of time just trying to catch up with everything. So and I still feel like I'm digesting stuff from that. So. But yeah,
So,
viewing party
Anne,
would be cool.
Other than your partner, your one great love in life, as far as I understand it, is horses. Is that correct?
Yes, all animals in general, but yes, horses specifically. I ride horses 3 times a week, and yeah, it's
Wow.
a great activity, and yeah.
Now, in the part of Canada you live in, like, can you just go out and find a horse and grab it and ride it, or do you have like other arrangements that you make? Like, I don't.
Yeah, I
What?
just sort of drive
Live in
along,
the
and
Wild
if I
West?
see,
Just let me pull this off the hitching post here. And what?
yeah, it's very, Canada, it's the Wild West out here.
Dale learn.
No, I have a specific barn that I go to, and I
Okay.
have permission to ride all of these horses. Yes.
That's good.
Oh,
I've
that's
been learning
amazing.
a ton about horses recently because my 21-month-old is obsessed with horses, and so we're reading all these books in the library about horses. And I didn't know there's so many different types of horses,
Oh,
colors and
yeah.
sizes, and
Some people grow out of it. Some people don't. So yeah.
Well, you'll appreciate that. So I'm racing my first sprint triathlon this
right.
weekend. The
Oh,
original
wow.
one I was going to do got canceled, and so now I'm doing this new one. But so I'm a heavier, bigger dude. A little bit over 6 foot, about around 250 pounds. I can't do the conversions in kilograms and all of that stuff, and so I'm just going to use those.
multiple kilos, multiple centimeters.
Lots of all the kilos.
We
And
use pounds
so
for weight.
Oh, do you really? Okay, I wasn't sure. It's like it's always so confusing, like who uses what anymore.
Well, we like to just mix it up with everything, but
Well, it's because in Canada, like, y'all get to just pick the best of both, whatever you want. So, but the racing category for larger people, individuals like myself that race these sprint triathlons is called Clydesdale. So I am racing in the Clydesdale division. So for those of you that are not horse enthusiasts, Clydesdales are these big, massive, powerful horses. So I appreciate the reference, I guess. But so for the women's category, though, it's a Athena for the category that's heavier than your average triathlete or whatever. It was just like Athenas, and then you've got Clydesdales. I was like, what is the? It's one is much more flattering as far as a class or division that you're racing than the other. So
is it
That's
sponsored by Budweiser?
it is not. It is not. I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, that's probably most people would probably get. Oh, I know what a Clydesdale horse is. It's the big horses that in the Budweiser commercials. Yeah.
Well, Taylor, speaking of your race, let's just kind of catch up on what's going on in life. I'd love to hear more about how you're feeling about that. You excited? You jacked? You ready to go?
Yeah. So the original race was last month, and it got canceled because there was a very high level of E. coli in the water, and so they
Sorry
were worried
about
about
that.
athletes getting sick. Right. I had some brother-in-laws that were going to do this with me, and so the joke was that they somehow contaminated the waters to get out of this, because when I went to reschedule, they were like, no, I'm not going to do one. I'm just we haven't trained enough for this. And so yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. It's been harder to be motivated, like when you have a goal and then it gets pushed back an extra month, like that last stretch where you're like, I was so ready for this to be done, and now it got pushed back a little bit further. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm ready for it to be done. I'm a little anxious about the swim portion, just because it's you're in the water with a bunch of people all at once, and when you're mainly used to training in a pool, like you're lap swimming, so you got lanes and or whatever, and now it's going to be like people swimming all around. So that's the only part I'm a little bit anxious about, but the rest of it, no, feel pretty good. And so gonna bring the kids up, and so they'll get to watch as well. So that'll be kind of fun for them. Probably not, I say that, but my wife's going to be stuck with them for the almost 2 hours it probably takes me to finish this thing. So we'll see how she feels about that. But then we'll take them to the zoo or something, and it's in Akron area,
Okay.
and they have a zoo there. So we're gonna go up there and probably do all that. So that's that's at least that part of things. How about you, as far as because you were doing a whole bunch of traveling, and you also went to that same area where my triathlon got scheduled, right? And nobody got sick, at least from
Yeah.
E. coli.
Yeah, no, I did some traveling, as Anne remembers. So I actually hung out with her and some other folks in Chicago, and I was having a real hard time because some personal stuff that was going on with my sister. Actually lives in Maui in Lahaina, which had undergone that forest or the wildfire. Between that and then some issues with the place I was staying at, not being able to get any sleep, I ended up leaving a little bit early, so I didn't get as much Anne time as I wanted. But it was really nice to meet her in person. And then I went down to Cincinnati and hung out with some other work friends down there. Went on a riverboat tour of the Ohio River, which it turns out it's big, which I think I knew. And then I went to the place you were supposed to do your swim, and I called them ahead of time because I don't want to go down there if this lake is contaminated, because
Right.
I might have my kids. They knew nothing about it. No, the water's fine. So either Taylor, you were making it up, or they just don't care and didn't want
I
anybody.
sent you
so.
a link to the website so you could see that it was legit, that I wasn't just putting it off.
Yeah. Anyway, how about you, Anne? You been doing anything fun in your personal life recently, or any travel or anything of note?
let's see. Oh, I was up at sort of a woodland beach this past weekend. So that was lovely because we've been getting a really odd weather. It's been super, super warm.
Hmm.
So that was nice to spend some time at the beach. And then I went for a run this morning. I felt very proud of myself. I go for usually one run a week. It's 5 kilometers, which is less than miles for anyone that's wondering the conversion. It's not a
Like
very
3.2.
yeah, so
Hmm.
that's I do that once a week. But I have a baby shower to go to on Sunday, so I did it today instead. So yeah,
Good for you.
Yeah.
I,
trying to. We invited Carl for our run that we did in
you guys
Chicago, and
did.
he declined.
Yeah, I was gonna
Which
say him like razzing me like, oh yeah, did you put something in the water? Get out your trial. It's like
no, no,
stop.
no. I do run a little bit, but at that point in time, there's like, okay, guys, I slept 3 hours last night. Like, I just don't feel like
No, that's
running
fair.
is gonna
Running to
be
the store
in
to
my.
get these balls does not count, Carl. We're
No, I
talking
went and got a
actual.
Diet Coke while they ran. Um, but speaking of running, I watch my kid in the morning for the first couple hours so my wife can get started with school with the other kids. And so I usually take him outside when it's nice, go in the
Mhm.
stroller, and I try to get a little bit of a jog in. So this morning, I was in total dad mode because I was pushing him in the jogging stroller, trying to run and track my miles, and at the same time feeding him grapes like one at a time from the back of the stroller. Like so, I'm like pulling him out of a bag, like plucking
Very
them off the stem,
impressive. It's a
handing them
lot
to
of
the kid while
multitasking.
pushing and running all at the same time. Yeah, it was a great run. So,
That's a great run.
yeah. Anyway, awesome. So, what have you guys been working on this last week? Anything interesting piqued your curiosity before? And then we'll dive into our main topic. And don't worry, I know you just can't wait to talk about Liquid. But in terms of
Yeah,
Taylor,
I
you doing
actually
anything
had an
interesting?
interest. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
no, go ahead,
No, we
Anne.
were
You're
gonna let
fine.
Ann go first, Carl.
Yeah,
Sorry, ladies
no,
first.
I had a really interesting one. So I do contract work and this kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I won't say too much about the specific project, but it was interesting because it was using this kind of old library that I had actually discovered before but hadn't really done anything with it. And it felt like such a throwback. It was short codes, so using short codes in Liquid.
Mhm.
So the actual repo, I think, is from I don't know, like 7 years ago or something, and it's kind of just been sort of abandoned. And it's you know, you can just Google short code Liquid, and what it allows you to do is if you're familiar with WordPress, short codes are very popular in WordPress.
Mhm.
You know, all sorts of things use them. And one of the issues with Shopify is that within the what you see is what you get editor, there's not great ways of injecting other content. Like, you know, you can't really have extra tables or throw in like a product, like add to cart or whatever. And so this library allows you to do that fairly easily, and you can create your own little custom templates and this kind of thing. And it all it is just this like massive liquid logic. And so you can create new short codes, like whether it's a YouTube video or an image or whatever, and then you can actually inject a specific template in there. So anyway, I was doing that, and that was just something that I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. Like, yeah, you could have used the sections api or something like that, but just to do it just with straight liquid and then use the featured product section code from the theme. Yeah, it's kind of fun.
That sounds
Yeah,
cool.
that's
Maybe
neat.
we can put a link.
Yeah, I've never heard. Yeah, I was looking it up. I muted myself so that way because I didn't want my keyboard to be too loud. But I did look this up. This is really cool. I've actually never
Isn't it
seen
interesting?
this before. Yeah, it's really neat.
Well, and I did a little bit more digging, and I guess they had an app at some point, but now they don't anymore. So you just kind of, again, it's two files, short code and then short code render. Throw those in the snippets, and then you create your own little templates in terms of what actually gets pulled in.
Huh.
Yeah,
Super handy.
maybe it'll come back. It's a little retro.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, I could see that being super helpful too, like you said, especially the people who are already used to, like working in WordPress and stuff like that. It's a really easy, like, jump over to
Yeah.
use something.
Well, it's great for clients because again, it gives them the chance
Mm-hmm.
to throw in like, oh, here's an article, especially great for SEO, what have you. and you throw in like a little product, you just pass in the handle, and then it's going to create a little product form for you.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Should you share, Taylor? What are you working on this week?
I did not share yet. No. So this week, been doing a little bit of everything as far as jumping into moving over this custom theme. One of those jobs where a merchant had a agency build them a custom theme years and years ago, and they based it off of a premium theme in Shopify, and then they needed to update to 2.0. Well, now the agency either is not doing that anymore, or they just don't have time, and so they worked with me to hey, like, let's figure this out and like stage this all set up. And so of course we were ready to launch kind of like earlier on this month, and then like we found a whole bunch of stuff that they wanted like carried over, so we're adding some more things here kind of last minute. And then the other thing that I was working on as well was some accessibility updates, and then checkout extensions, which I think I know we've both been poking around in that area here lately, but I did get a couple of extensions only, checkout extensions up and running for stuff that I'm needing to move over from checkout.liquid. So that has been very handy to be able to do that instead of having to run a full-blown app, because as a theme dev, trying to figure out how to do all that mess or whatever was kind of a lot. So it's a little bit more limited in what we can do with that, but it's still nice that it's still capable. So that's what I've been working on.
Man, Taylor, you're just crushing it. I've also been working on checkout extensions. I don't know which one yours, what kind of logic yours have, but mine feels like it's taking me a lot longer to get through than I want. But my time's kind of limited too. So it's this weird world of like I'm learning React while I'm trying to do the checkout extension, because I don't typically mess around with front-end frameworks because they change so frequently. It's like, well, what do I care? But I kind of wanted to do the Shopify way with this one. And, so it's like, I know what I need to do here, but it's been so long since I've been working with a tech stack where I feel like a complete noob in some sense, right? And so it's a helpful experience to remember, oh, this is what it's like. You don't have just that context, what to even look for or think of. And that's where tools like, using ChatGPT a little bit to kind of help me understand what I need to understand has been useful. But it gives me a lot more empathy too for developers that are either just getting started or also like transitioning into newer areas, because it is a bit of a beast. And then continuing to work on this data import-export project for moving someone from BigCommerce to Shopify, and did some review imports this week for them. They used Stamped in the Shopify app, and they actually have a really nice import tool, which I didn't realize at first, and so that made the whole job pretty easy. So
nice.
Now we're going to transition to the next part of our show. Did you hear it? Did it work?
Sound effects, yeah.
Did it?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I'll do it again. Okay, we're transitioning again. I'll do the different transition. And now we're transitioning.
Ooh.
Did you hear it that time?
I heard that.
Okay.
I heard it.
Great. It's exciting.
All right. So those of you that have borne with us for a few minutes now are ready to hear the main topic. Why we brought Anne here in the first place, because we are going to dig into all things sections and liquid and themes, and it's just going to be amazing. So, Anne, tell us everything.
Well, I mean, I feel like I have to do a plug for Design Packs to start with.
Yeah,
you do.
Because...
do it. We want
Okay.
you to. We want you to.
Yeah.
All right. So...
If you don't talk about it, I will. So
Yeah.
So, when I was working at out of the Sandbox, when I first started there, that was before we had sections. So the way to move things around on the homepage was with drop downs. I don't know if you remember those days. So, and then we had to do the first conversion to when the actual homepage had sections. So I was part of, converting all of the existing themes over to work with sections. And then I also was there when we created Flex, and that was where we really started to dig into, okay, how can we have the concept of blocks, and then we also have these sections. How can we try and get that on every page, and did a lot of work there. And so then it kind of came to this point where it was like, well, when you're building premium themes, you have this mindset of, okay, what settings make sense? What works from a sort of a CMS, like a that kind of perspective. And so what I found was I really like content management systems. And so it was this idea of, okay, how do we take any section that's on any theme and make that available to any other theme? And so that's kind of how Design Packs was born, because what we found is we had 7 different themes and they would have sections in each theme, but they'd be slightly different. So you couldn't just port them over to each one. And just from a maintainability standpoint, it became a bit of a nightmare over time. And so we just thought, okay, well, the idea was, could we have sections that are able to live independently? They're not tied to this larger theme.
What was the thing that made them incompatible? Was it the sort of parameters they were accepting? Or was there some other aspect of it?
A lot of it was just styling, to be honest, because if you think about it, the traditional mindset, and there are pros and cons to how you set up your CSS and your JavaScript, but a lot of that logic and that styling would be in a global single file. So as soon as you separate it out, it's like, I don't have anything to talk to anymore. So the idea with Design Packs is that we do have one very teeny tiny global JavaScript file that's actually not even required. And we do have some global styles, but for the most part, everything is actually like componentized and just within that section, that one liquid section. Or in our case, 150 liquid sections that you can add to your store.
Awesome. Because you guys, when did you officially start Design Packs?
We launched in January 2021. And so this was pre-Sections Everywhere, I'd like to point out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and now there are other apps that are doing similar things to what we're doing, where they're selling individual sections, but we were the first in that category where it was, hey, you can use, because that was our most common question when we first launched, is people were like, how do I get this on my article page, my collection page, XYZ, other pages? And we're like, well, we can hard code it for you. So when we heard the announcement of Sections Everywhere, it was like perfect timing for us. Yep. So that was really exciting. And yeah, so since then we have about 3,000 people that are using the app. Nice. And it's so nice talking. Honestly, my favorite thing is talking to merchants and agencies that are using it, because I don't know, building a product, the most rewarding thing to me is seeing actually people use it and have beautiful designs and add in their content. So it's just been really, really fun to see that.
Well, and it's great too from the perspective of a merchant who I've bought this theme, and oh man, like I really wish I've seen this on another store or whatever, and I really wish I could have this, instead of paying somebody to come in and add that in there, or having to load in a totally different app to kind of hack something together. You have a solution that basically like, well, yeah, you can just add that section directly to your theme now. So I like using Design Packs for when I'm talking to merchants, and some folks, I just tell them like, hey, this is perfect. If this is all that you're needing, try this app, in the sense that like, if we need to go further than that, because my positioning, or like kind of how I position myself, right, is custom code or customization, stuff like that without apps. And so, but there's a lot of people where it's just like, that's not really necessary, right? Like, oh, you want this section, you could already get this in this app, and it's going to be way more affordable than somebody like me, that come in and do that, because what you want it is easily achievable here. So I think Design Packs is perfect for that. But I do love that y'all also have the option where agencies can build really very customized themes even, and stand something up that, oh, this is, this premium theme from Shopify or what have you, but it's not even recognizable because we're using Design Packs and we've got all these additional sections that aren't natively available. So it's a really, really good use case, I think, for both of those camps. So, and really unique how y'all came up with that. And I don't know how that initially came about. I know you kind of talked a little bit about kind of just, it's almost like right place, right time, right? And you're just kind of like in the system, so you kind of like know as things are coming out. And so part of that is, good timing, and then also just obviously making good decisions. But I've seen a lot of folks who have done that, out in the Shopify ecosystem, where they're selling individual sections, right? And they might, hey, here's like a copy and paste. you can add this in, here's the instructions, and then maybe we'll upsell if you want us to do this yourselves. How did y'all make the decision to really like totally like we're not even going to mess with this here, like we just went the app route, and that makes so much more sense, especially the way that Shopify is going. Like everything is kind of like leaning that way anyways. But I thought that was brilliant. I don't know if you can talk about that, how y'all kind of stumbled on that idea instead of just creating a little marketplace where people can buy sections. Like, let's just make an app that can just directly inject that there.
Yeah. Huge part of that was me connecting with Trudy. So Trudy is co-founder. She also runs the agency Up at 5, and she, like Karl, prefers the back end of things. So she is very much like into the databases and all that kind of stuff. So I knew myself, I am a front end developer, dyed in the wool kind of thing. I do know enough sort of PHP and database stuff to be dangerous. However, I knew that building an app, especially at that point, before they had the CLI 3.0 and all that kind of thing, it would have taken me a long time to get to the point. Plus, I have a very perfectionist attitude. I always really want things to be perfect before I launch. And so having Trudy as a co-founder, she brought the back-end skills, lots of huge technical skills. And so the two of us, we balance each other out really well. And so I approached her and I was like, hey, would you be interested in building this app? Because she had previously built an app as well. So I knew that she knew this Shopify space. I knew she had already built a Shopify app. And once she kind of got the concept and got the idea, she was like, yeah, let's do this. So over the winter break, we basically were just like, let's do this. So she built the whole app, and then we had some sections and we launched MVP. It was very MVP. And since then, the main thing really is the idea behind it. If I had done it on my own, it would have been a copy paste situation. But because I was able to team up with somebody else, it made it stronger. And so that's where it all came about, for it to be an app versus just copy paste.
That's awesome.
That's really cool. I know we would love to talk to you about the app and what's it like to develop that and all the things you had to go through for forever, but you're here under the premise that we're going to talk more about like Liquid and sections and stuff. So
all of the sections in Liquid, yes.
Yeah. So where do you want to start? Anything top of mind for you?
Well, I do know that Taylor loves notes, and I also made some notes. So
great.
I was thinking maybe we could talk about our favorite Liquid hacks.
That would be great. Let's do it.
Okay.
I don't have any.
Maybe I should have warned you.
No, actually,
Okay.
I have one. I have one.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a hack or not, but one thing I learned early on that was very helpful to me is that you can use the JSON filter in Liquid if you're doing some debugging, just to JSON out a variable to see what actually is going on under the hood. So that's
and then use console log for it.
I just put it right on the screen. You're supposed to use console log. That would work too. Console log would also work.
Yeah, I throw it in a script. I throw in a little script tag and put in console log, and then you have it, and you can like,
I just show it
properties.
Right in the middle of the open. But
I mean,
that better.
Works though. That works too. I've done that plenty of times where you're just trying to print something to figure out what's going on, and so I'll just print it. I'll just drop it into like an H1 tag, and so it's like on the screen, like bam, like.
Which is fine unless you're working on a live site, which then it's not so great.
Well, yes, but that's that's a no. So
yeah. Oh.
That's a great one, because especially when you're using. I don't know about if you have run into the meta fields and trying to access meta field properties, and then they just fail silently all the time.
Yep.
Yes. Especially if and I still have to hack my way through that sometimes, where I'm using that little drop in directly onto the screen to see what's getting printed out. So if you're trying to run through like a product list and something's completely inaccessible for whatever reason, and trying to remember like, oh, is this a values, or do I need to use the meta field text filter here or whatever? So yeah, that is definitely one that gets me all the time.
So I have one that I've been using more frequently, specifically because of how we build our sections. We use a lot of blocks, and sometimes you want to have a collection of blocks that are, or maybe even something a little bit, maybe even one block that's a little bit separate. And so what you can actually do is you can use, have you used the where filter before?
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Yeah, so it can be super handy. Let's say, for example, you have you're adding blocks. You have got a title and that kind of thing, and then you also have an image, but you want that image to be outside of the regular loop. So the usual way that you could do it is you could say, okay, for block in section.blocks, and then you can either do like a capture or something like that, capture that block, and then put that code somewhere else. But that would have to be after that loop, right?
Right.
Or you can do conditional where you're saying, okay, don't show this one and then have that other for loop up at the top again. The cool thing about the where filter is that you can actually create a new array that only has those specific types of blocks. So you can say, take your section.blocks and then do your pipe and then say where and say whatever the name of the block that you want to separate out. We use this we have a section that's called slideshow with text. And so we have a little slideshow and then it has text beside it. We wanted the text beside it to still be able to be rearranged. So that's all done with blocks. But we wanted the slideshow to be, sort of compartmentalized. So what we do is we actually use this where filter and we grab all of the blocks that are slide blocks. And so then we're able to tell how many there are. We can loop through just the slide blocks and we can put them anywhere we want on the page or within the section. It's super, super powerful.
Yeah, I was going to say so you're able to rearrange text within the slide specifically is what you're talking about. That's the use case where you're going to use where. How are you calling that out specifically?
Not exact. So it's not the text in the slide. The slideshow
Okay, gotcha.
is sort of it's beside the text.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That's really
Nice.
cool, Anne. I think actually the where filter is my favorite filter so far because it harkens back to the where clause in SQL. And it's like, finally, something in Liquid that makes sense. I can do something useful. So, no, that's a really, really great use of the where filter.
It's a lot of fun. And once you start kind of thinking in that way, it does all of a sudden gives you all these options again where you're not having, because for loops, can be really bad for performance. So this is a way to just sort of pluck out specific blocks.
Yeah, that would be interesting, especially in like a large section or something with a lot of blocks, to do some sort of performance comparison to see like what's the cost of using where to construct a few arrays that are specifically scoped to things that you want versus running through the whole iteration in a loop.
Oh, I would love to know that too. Yeah.
Let's do it. Come on, Taylor. Fire it up.
Fire it up. Well, I'm going to have to start digging into where, because I've used it before, but I'm like trying to think of like the actual use cases where that's actually been something I've done. So that's interesting. I'm going to have to play around with that because I did just hack together like a little, hero section or whatever. And I just use kind of like a grid section where, you give the, the client, controls and stuff like that where they can change, how much width it takes up or whatever. And so like, for instance, instead of like one big slide and what have you kind of type thing, it just made like a basically a 3-column grid. And so they've got different, blocks within that and what have you. So this would potentially be a use case where I could probably make that a little bit more flexible. So that's interesting. I'm going to have to play around with that a little bit more.
I'm all about the clean code. If the less, when you look at a file, the less intimidating it is, the better, in my opinion. So
yeah, 100%.
So speaking of clean code, not to derail us too much. So, Anne, a lot of the themes that I end up looking at, there's a lot of content markup mixed in with the Liquid logic, like just iterations and ifs and else's and the big chunks of stuff. Do you have particular methodologies or preferences around you try to construct your data objects ahead of time and then reference them in the HTML, or do you just go and just output HTML and mix all the code right in there? Does that make sense?
I don't mind mixing and matching Liquid in itself. It's a templating language. Like that's kind of what it's meant for, right?
Right.
Sure.
So I don't mind when there's sort of things added in. I think personally I try to stay away from, let's see if I can say this word properly, obfuscation. Try to avoid that. So anywhere that I can have like directly like what it is, so like block.settings, XYZ, then I will always try to have that, as opposed to declaring that as like, a variable somewhere else, that kind of thing. There are use cases for each. At the end of the day, like, every developers love opinions, right? So I like to keep the KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So the more commenting, the more like straightforward things are. Don't get too tricky with it. That's my personal approach.
That's the one thing that kills me the most about Liquid is the commenting. I really wish there was a one line, easy to use, just 2-character kind of comment system like you do in other languages, because it pains me to see
type out comment and and
yeah, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, Taylor, do you have any hacks?
Well, so when I stumbled across the other day, actually, we were talking about issues with, like lazy loading performance on different things, like for instance, the editor for like blog posts. So when a client or whatever wants to drop in an image and those sorts of things, and we're getting, snagged with these huge performance issues because they're dropping in like 10 images and there's nothing that natively makes them lazy loading. And sometimes you'll drop into a theme. I don't know if y'all have ever run across this too, where they're trying to lazy load all images or whatever. They're running some JavaScript to find everything in the image tag, and they lazy load, and that's a terrible practice too, because we're then hitting everything that's above the fold. We're lazy loading. We don't want to do that. So the interesting thing though that I ran into, I was talking to another person about this, and Liam Merlin. He's over at Cubics Media. He's like a senior engineer. He's a really smart dude. And so he had suggested as well, we were just talking about this because I was like, I'm just going in, I'm like replacing like all these lazy loading tags afterwards or whatever, because you can drop in and do that in the HTML or what have you with page content. And he was like, just run a liquid filter for replace. And so every time that you have the image tag dropped in there, just replace it with the beginning of image and then add the lazy loading attribute to it directly. And I was like, why did I never think of that? That's so smart. And so now I'm going through and just like updating all of these article templates to make sure that I'm doing that now, because it's brilliant. Most instances, you're running a featured image, so you don't have to really worry about that first image at the top anyhow. So pretty much everything is going to end up being lazy loaded. So using the replace filter or something like that. So it's just, drop, when you're inserting your page.content to the article there in the liquid tag, just using the filter replace and then just capturing that first part of that image tag and then adding that lazy loading equals lazy, so the HTML attribute or whatever. That is my newest liquid hack or whatever for that.
That's great. I hadn't heard of that use case before. It makes a ton of sense.
I know. I was like, why have I never thought of that? That's
Yeah,
and that filter,
yeah.
that's just doing straight up text substitution, like looking for a filter and then replacing it with what you provide.
Yeah. See, I probably would have overthought that and gone the route, because I've done things in the past of where I've gotten all of the images out with a split filter. Yeah. And then, that's kind of fun to do too, because then you can create like little galleries or like pull out different things. But yeah, just a full on replace for the lazy load. Yeah, that's great.
Right. It's so simple. It's so simple. I was like, why did I not think of that?
Yeah, that's great.
That's cool.
What about you, Carl?
I already gave you my one hack, and I told you how much I love Where. Let's see, what else do I have?
I told you how much I love Where.
Oh, man. Well, I always, early on, I want to say early on, probably even to present day, I sometimes easily get confused with trying to work with JavaScript and Liquid and referencing values that are in Liquid in JavaScript or JavaScript in Liquid, vice versa, right? And so the hack there is to like take the time to understand how that works, because it's very useful. But if you care to elaborate more, if anyone has any particular tips around that, that'd be great.
Data attributes. Oh, yeah. Also creating like a little JSON that is within like a script tag that you can set up as an object and then reference that in your JavaScript is also
That's a good one.
A good thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah. And then just
I think that's kind of the tough part though, of like bouncing around back and forth between like when you can access something in JavaScript versus Liquid. So I don't know, maybe, Anne, if you've got tips for how you decide when you're going to do that instead. So obviously, performance implications is probably maybe the number one reason why you'd want to lean liquid whenever possible. But I don't know if you've got tips for that too. I think that's sometimes I struggle with that of like when you get into like a really good JavaScript mode. There's sometimes where I just feel really good with JavaScript and I'm like, I'm gonna do everything in JavaScript or whatever. And then I start doing things with JavaScript where I'm like, I should have done this in Liquid. And so sometimes it's hard, right, to put one before the other. I think you can do the same thing with CSS. Sometimes you try to get real hacky with JavaScript and you're like, oh wait, we actually can do this now with CSS. So do you have any like good examples maybe of instances where you're gonna lean more Liquid or JavaScript, or how you kind of like how you make that decision, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think specific to Shopify themes, the one that I always come back to where you need both is anytime you're using the product form with the variants, right? Because
Yep.
that's the classic scenario where you have the logic set up in your Liquid and you look at the page and you're like, amazing, it works. And then you click on another variant, you're like, oh, it doesn't work anymore.
Oh.
Yeah. So what I like to do is I first set up the logic in Liquid to make sure that when the page first loads, it does what it is supposed to do. Because you could have everything just in JavaScript, but then you're having to run that whatever the function you have on page load, right? So it's like have it set up by default on that variant or on the product. And then what I do usually is just copy over that logic to JavaScript. And then I'm like, okay, here's my if statement, here's the conditional, blah, blah, blah. And then kind of build it in the same way so that they kind of look similar. If that makes sense. I mean, they won't look similar because obviously you're doing it right in the markup, but if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And so that's a really great use case for that. And that's probably where I'm thinking of that as well. Like when I get most confused is when you're doing a lot of product form hacking, you're having to deal with variants, it's just easier to access a lot of stuff and what's functional with JavaScript than, what you can really get away with in Liquid other than getting stuff on the page that you need to.
Yeah. I do another example actually of something that I had previously written in JavaScript, and then I actually had launched it. And interestingly, it was I don't know if you so Alana, she had used design packs for something, and then it was her partner had noticed that it was in JavaScript. He's like, I'm pretty sure you can do this in Liquid, and actually helped come up with how we could parse it with Liquid. So it was so interesting because my brain immediately. So I'll tell you the use case, the scenario. So essentially, we wanted a way to pull out if you had a link to a product in an article, so a blog post, it would pull out and display that as an actual, like pull in the product information. So the image, the price, the link and all that kind of stuff. So my mind immediately goes to JavaScript. I'm like, perfect.
Yeah.
Do that, do a little fetch call, grab the information back, display it, populate it. It's sort of like with product recommendations kind of type deal, right?
Right.
But there actually is a way to do that just through Liquid. And so, yeah, so you don't have to use JavaScript at all. Essentially, what you can do is you can parse through, use the split, similar to the image tags that we were talking about.
Right.
Grab those links, search, see if there's like products, in the URL kind of thing, like / product / and then take that, parse out, you have to parse out the handle, parse out if there's any parameters, take the variant, but then you can, from there, once you have the product handle, you can just use all products.
Right. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
People are
easy
just so smart with this stuff. Gosh dang it.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy. So that was a good one because, again, we were using JavaScript and then we were able to just use Liquid instead.
Right. Yeah, and definitely. So as far as you're talking about like fetch as opposed to like just being able to parse that out with Liquid, like that's got to be a performance win for sure. Like,
for sure.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Carl's taking notes.
I am. Seriously taking notes. You hear my keyboard?
Someone's typing away furiously.
It's recorded. You can watch this later.
Well, we're there's a lot of hand waving going on, and we're talking about code in on a video or audio format. So I'm like, we probably have to give some specific concrete examples for folks.
Yeah,
This is hard to
Yeah,
follow
yeah.
mentally. So
Yeah,
I'll ask Taylor
yeah.
to put that together. He loves doing that kind of stuff.
Do either of you have any like annoying things about Liquid, like things that you would want to change?
Ooh.
Comments.
Right.
You already threw out
I know-
comments.
I
Well,
know it's stupid, but anyway.
it's true. Yeah, it is though. It's pain sometimes, right? So that's just when if you get, obviously something like this is where something like GitHub Copilot is really really handy because it gives you really fast suggestions for comments and stuff like that or whatever. The autocomplete for that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, okay. And I'll stop harping on comments, but it's not just the comment typing it out. It's like visually the way it looks. Like it takes up so much screen space.
Oh yeah, I get that.
Anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead, Anne. You had something actually productive to
I
say.
was just going to say, for anyone that's not using Copilot, I recently started using if you're using VS Code, an extension called Cody, and it uses from SourceGraph, and it's very nice. It gives great suggestions by looking at your actual repo. And then sort of making suggestions from there. So for anyone that doesn't want to pay I still haven't gone into the paid Copilot. I should. But anyway, this is kind of a good in between.
I get that. I'm gonna have to check out Cody. The problem that I run into is how reliant you become with tools like that, and so I'm waiting for because Copilot is relatively affordable at this point. It's pretty easy for me to justify, okay, this is saving me at least this much time to go ahead and pay for it. But if they get to the point where it starts to become like an enterprise level SaaS where you're getting charged like all this extra money for it or kind of type thing, I could see where I'm like, oh shoot, now I'm gonna have to figure something out because I'm so reliant on this now. Like it definitely makes you more productive. I don't care for the fact that it sometimes will give you straight up wrong stuff, just the same as ChatGPT, but
Talking to a junior dev, I mean, you should never know.
you roll the
Speaking
dice
of
here.
Copilot and all that stuff, so I accidentally got Olama installed and running a model on my local laptop the other day. And I was like, this is just like OpenAI right here on my laptop. Not sure what I did there to get that working. And they have another project called Continue, which actually brings that interface into VS Code or Visual Studio. So if you don't want to pay for Copilot or you want to run really different models, you actually can just set this stuff up and run it right there on your laptop and have it talk to Visual Studio. So something to consider as well.
I should investigate that.
Yeah. Olama is the main project that lets you run these models, and there's different models people make available, and then the project that helps you bring it into Copilot is called Continue. There's also some ones that just provide like a web interface around the model, similar to what you find in ChatGPT, if you want to do it that way too.
I love all the fun little tools and stuff. I don't understand half of where to find stuff, but yeah, I'll have to check that one out. As far as things, I'm trying to think of like instances in Liquid that are really annoying or buggy to me. Right now the biggest issue probably is meta objects and accessing stuff there. But that's not like general wide Liquid specific probably. I'm trying to think of a good instance where I'm like, this is super annoying with Liquid.
Well, the one that really sticks out is something that you can do in Liquid that you can't do in Shopify Liquid. Has that ever happened to you guys? It's just me. Because like Shopify Liquid is like a subset of Liquid. Like they don't allow everything they have. So sometimes if things are redocumentation that's not like Shopify specific. Like, I can totally do it that way.
Yeah.
And then you go back to Shopify, like, nope, you can't. Oh.
So I've been running into that more so with I don't know if you've run into this, Carl, but running checkout extensions and trying to figure out like which APIs I can actually use here because there's like you're trying to like pull something from GraphQL and everything's breaking when it's like you can't actually ask for that. And so I actually did run into an issue where someone at Shopify had reached out on Twitter and because I had posted about like extensions only, and they're like, hey, like if you're going through this and have issues with the docs, definitely give us feedback. And that was great. Awesome. And so when I actually went through that or whatever, I was like, I cannot get this to work. And I don't know if it's just because every single time I'm trying to just pull a price or whatever. And mainly it was because I didn't have the storefront API enabled and I was just trying to run everything through the admin API. And so that was just my own like But they did call that out when I messaged them, and they said, "Oh, we can improve the docs here. We'll go ahead and do that. That's good feedback." So I appreciate at least them being cool about that. But no, I don't think I've run into issues where, mainly because all the Liquid references that I'm looking at are always like straight Shopify Liquid, and I don't run into it in other instances all that much. Versus you, you probably work in a lot of different things other
Oh
than
yeah, lots of really
Shopify.
important,
So
complicated things. Yeah, it's hard to talk about. It's just I couldn't explain it. Yeah.
All
well,
those NDAs.
yeah, does Bridgetown? That's what you're. Is it Bridgetown? Am I making that up?
Yeah, no, you're. It's what it's called.
Does it
Yep.
support like Liquid?
It does. Yeah, it's got a bunch
Nice.
of different. I think out of the box, Liquid and ERB. You can also throw in some other ones too, but I'm just using straight up Liquid right now.
Nice.
Straight up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
you
for
and
me,
anything?
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Taylor.
yeah, I was saying sorry. Yeah, for me, just that's usually the biggest issue. I'm trying to think of like a perfect example. The stuff that trips me up sometimes is obviously not passing in. Like if I'm trying to render a snippet, if I'm not passing, something in properly, like that trips me up every now and again as well, for sure. And
Yeah, that was interesting when they changed from include to render.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because so was the big difference because I didn't necessarily understand the technical implications for that, but is that part of that really realistically is like we're only passing in exactly what we need really instead of
Yes.
like we're just dumping
Exactly.
everything into include.
Yeah, so previously, and this is why maybe this will be helpful for people that have to like see the include or don't realize what that was before, because a
Well,
lot of apps still might use it, but
Apps and a lot of themes still, like if you're working on a lot of things, I still run into include all the time. Like, I'm gonna like go back through and fix stuff, So that's good.
It's almost kind of like when we went from like with like the newer version of like JavaScript, where we're using const and let, and all of a sudden those are no longer available like outside of functions kind of thing. So in a way, it's sort of similar where if you include a snippet, it's going to have access to all of the variables that were defined in that parent file. Whereas if you use render, what you'll see is that you need to explicitly pass in those variables, like whatever they are, so that the snippet can actually access them.
Yeah, that's a good thing, I think now.
It is a good thing.
But I think early on too, I really did not understand this fully, and so I would pass in like individual like section settings, like individual like, variables that I wanted to use down instead of just like pass the whole section or pass the whole block or whatever, And so I was like just individually typing stuff out just to get access to it or whatever. It took me a second to like actually grok that. It probably longer than I should have, but handy to have for sure now.
It would be fascinating someday if we ever get popular enough, Taylor, to attract someone from the Shopify engineering team that could explain some of their cost-benefit analysis in terms of why they enable or disable certain features, because of the scale that they're rendering these stores. I'm sure there's lots of thought that goes into the data sizes and the amount of things that are passing back and forth. So it'd be really interesting to hear how that.
You totally could. Their performance team, I bet you could get someone from there.
Yeah, I think so.
I believe in you.
I hope so.
I was actually DMing someone from the performance team this week, so maybe I will see if. Mainly because I put my foot in my mouth on something.
Well, here's what you say. You
before
say,
I realized who the person was, like because they were talking about releasing the sections.index feature that we all really want to come out. So, like from a performance standpoint, where we can actually target like above the fold sections, so we can move away from like lazy loading or whatever and blanket statement, and instead now like I'll build in something to escape lazy loading or whatever. But then you have to like merchant has to know how to do that, and then you got to remember if you move the section around, all this stuff or whatever. So someone had mentioned that or whatever, and they responded, and I didn't recognize the person's name, and I was just like, oh, like sections.index, they've been talking about that for so long. It's like sections everywhere before Online Store 2.0 finally came out. I was like, it's coming, but like, I don't know that it's anytime soon. And the person was like, no, it's coming soon, I promise you. And then I looked at the person up, I was like, no, idiot. Oh. But then he DM'd me later and he was cool about it. So, I'd stuck my foot in my mouth, but at least he was very, very kind about the whole situation.
What it tastes like.
Not good.
Okay.
Not good.
So we've been prattling for a while now, but before we transition to our pick of the week, Anne, is there anything else you wanted to make sure we understood or pass along? Because we could talk about this for hours, and maybe we'll have to have
We
you back and
could.
talk for more hours. But
Oh,
Well,
come back
I think
anytime.
we can go ahead. I was gonna say, can we go ahead and like reserve another and slot here at some
yeah,
point? I would just like to go ahead and put that out there that like we can have you on more than once, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Again, I could talk about this all day. The other thing that we'll talk about it another time, but there's some really fun things that you can do with loops and counting within loops and sort of stuff like that.
oh man, you leave us
Ooh.
hanging,
And we didn't
huh?
even talk about the cycle tag. Oh, okay, we'll come back.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one more? I can't tell.
I'm so excited now. So you can come on just like, a couple episodes, right? This is episode 6. We can come back on in like episode 8. We'll
Awesome.
skip like a
Yeah.
week and then you can come right back on.
We'll have a whole episode of you coming and you fix my React code live. That'd be a lot of fun.
Ooh.
But now it's time for. Oh wait, that was preview. Darn it! Time for. There we go. The next topic, which is, I'm still learning how to podcast. The changelog. This is the time where Taylor, because I never do it, shares with us something that he found interesting in the changelog this week at Shopify. So Taylor, what did you find that was interesting?
So I've got a couple of things, and so I can read off these, or y'all can read off a whole bunch of them. But I'll read off first my favorite because so that way no one steals from me. But theme file usage now tracked in the file section in admin. So this is where when you've got information where you're uploading something, you can now actually find in content and files where it's being used on the site. So you've got like images and things like that. I think this is super helpful because I don't know if other people have run. I know other people have probably run into this too. I'll get a screenshot from the person that I'm working with, and they'll be like, "Hey, this is broken. Like, what's the deal with this or whatever?" And I'm like, "What page is this on? Like, you have to tell me where this is." And so, in order to circumvent that, I mean, I'm still probably going to ask them because you've got to train people to give you information you need to properly troubleshoot things. But at least now, if I want to get it done, I can quickly probably find this faster just going into content and files and see all the places it's used in order to figure out where I need to start looking. So super handy, very, very useful. Lots of different use cases for this, I think, to be able to call that out.
That'd be very nice. Speaking of finding things, I know it's off topic, but Anne, I just gotta say once again, thanks so much for pointing me out that browser extension. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's super useful for finding things in the Shopify theme editor if you're doing it online. Liquify, Shopify code search.
My favorite thing. I use it every day. I was bereft when it stopped working for a bit when they changed the URL structure, but the developer so on top of things, he had it fixed they had it fixed maybe like 2 weeks later. So
I don't know who that is, but if you're listening and you wrote Liquify, thank you so much.
woo-woo. Yeah.
Figure out who that is. Check them down.
So it works like in the online store, like code editor. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh yeah,
That's cool.
Luke
I didn't know about
Chadwick.
this.
Thank you, Luke.
We'll
Write
have
them
to
a
link
review.
that up. I'll get that from y'all.
Yeah. Cool.
I've got a couple
right.
more if anybody else wants to. Do we need to cover any other changelog updates? There's
I think
another
we
big
do.
one that I think is
All right.
particularly probably helpful,
Fine.
As well.
Just do it, Taylor. Just do it. You know you're gonna do it. Stop
I'm
asking.
gonna
Just
do it
do it.
anyways. Search filters for built for Shopify apps in the Shopify App Store. I thought that was pretty neat. So there's been a whole deal for a while where people were like, "We're doing this built for Shopify thing. We don't even know if it's going to actually help or not." But now there's a search filter just for built for Shopify. I think that's one of the tough things of, you've got all these different apps on the Shopify App Store, how hard it is for merchants to find stuff. And so now it's a pretty small number in comparison to the apps that actually have the built for Shopify badge right now. So I think that is a really good use case or call out for folks as far as like why you should use it.
You guys recall with Built with Shopify if it has to be an embedded app?
Mhm.
Does
It
it?
does.
That's one of my things with that. I think it's a positive thing, but for there are certain use cases of apps, either ones that simply won't serve themselves well by being embedded, and or maybe they even consider somewhat legacy in terms of the code base behind them. It would just be a monumental effort to bring it into the embedded app area, right? That they're never going to be able to benefit from that, and so they're going to become kind of pariahs in the App Store world, which is
Mhm.
unfortunate because it's not necessarily reflecting the utility or the quality of the app itself.
Well,
Yeah.
I can tell you, we're for Q4, we're working on getting our app up to sort of making sure that we check all the boxes to get built for
Hmm.
Shopify, and it's not a small lift. It's not, especially, and our app's only been around for like 2 years now, but it's changed so much since then.
Hmm.
So I agree that it's good to have that filtering, and it is something we're working towards. But it's tough. It's tough to keep up.
Well, and I should probably say I know every dev has talked about like how significant the lift is to get it to where it meets all the qualifications. And so, and I know there's a lot of issues too, just because there's also like specific like core web vital metrics that have to be met as well. And so that was a real issue in how they were tracking it previously before as well. I know, just from seeing people talk online and stuff or what have you. But I do think it's a lot of apps as well. I think it's probably one that's going to like put people up and over, right, to some degree. But a lot of the big name apps, like they don't care that they're not like even messing around with built for Shopify or stuff like that. So as long as you've got people like us, also referring people to design packs, I think that's probably you know your best bet with a lot of instances is just having people that can actually refer you, and
Mhm.
I think that's huge.
Well,
So I don't think it's a live or die by thing, but I do think it's helpful, probably to help people
we
just get over like the choices overload, right?
yeah, we will still get there. Like we'll get the
Hmm.
badge. It's when Shopify says jump, we ask how high. So we're
Right.
dedicated
Yeah.
to being in the ecosystem. We're not. Some of the apps look at where they're looking at. Oh, we're gonna service this. Sort of spread out. Whereas we're solely Shopify. So
Right.
Very good. All right, shall we do our picks of the week then?
Let's do
sure.
it.
All right, I'm not gonna give you the mess of transitions because I screwed those up so bad. So Taylor's doing something right now on the editing side to make it cool. All right, picks of the week. Taylor, you wanna go first?
Yeah, I feel like I talked a lot, but yeah, I sure can. So a lot of what we were talking about today is we're talking about like Liquid, right? And all the difficulties sometimes of where we're just running to the point where we're just printing something on the screen. Well, now Shopify has a new command for themes in the CLI console. You can actually run, it's so like IRB, like with Ruby, you can just run basically this console and just pull in like liquid objects to figure stuff out. It gives you this nice little printout. You can reference everything within the object. It doesn't yet support meta fields or meta objects, but it does a really right like darn it. But they're already working on it. The lead on it was in the partner Slack and did a really quick little like demo, and I was like, this is awesome. So I was playing around with it yesterday, and that was the very first thing I tried was like checking to see if I could get meta fields and meta object stuff that I was assigning to it from there. I was like, no, this doesn't work. And so they did say though that there's an open GitHub issue, and so it's something that they're looking at. But I think this is super cool. So if you're running into something where why isn't like the product selected a first available variant, whatever, like what is that even giving me right now or whatever, you can just drop that directly into the console while you're running the CLI or whatever, if you're running on the dev command and stuff like that, and it will just tell you like exactly what you can access from there. It's really, really awesome. Super helpful.
I feel like I've dreamed of that tool in the years past. Like, why doesn't somebody write, this kind of thing? Finally,
Yeah.
it's here. Thank you,
Well,
Shopify.
now we don't have to print it to the web page to figure out what it's spitting out. So it's pretty cool.
Cool. And did you have one? I know we kind of put you on the spot when we first
I do
started by
have one.
saying, "Oh, good,
I certainly do. It's actually a specifically Google extension for Gmail, and it's called Ready to Send. And it's of course it's AI because all things are these days. And it's actually what it does is you install it and you can set um, some preferences and this kind of thing. But it's very cool because I don't know about you, but I have a little bit of email anxiety. I don't like replying to emails. There's nothing to me worse than just like a blank reply. So what it'll actually do is it looks at your emails in a very intelligent way. So it ignores promotions, ignores newsletters and that kind of thing. And it looks at previous like history in the email and it creates a draft reply for you. So, and you don't have to generate it on the spot. If you go into your email and there's already replies waiting for you that you just have to go in and review and say, yep, that sounds good, send. Oh, make a couple tweaks, send. It's fabulous. Yeah.
What?
That's awesome. What is this called?
Ready to send.
Oh man, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's very good.
Type.
Well, email is such a time suck. So anything that helps me work through email more quickly,
Yeah.
I'm on board.
It's called Ready to Send? I can't find it.
Yeah, their SEO is not great. They just launched recently. So here, I'll find it.
If it's not on the first page, it doesn't exist.
It's the URL is getreadytosend.com.
Oh, that's a good URL.
Wow. That's like right on point there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I don't see your endorsement anywhere on here, Ian.
I did write a review for it actually.
Did you?
In the
Nice.
yeah, in the
Oh, so you're one of those folks that are like really good about. That's always really interesting with people that are like, oh, like we need reviews for this, that, the other, and then like they never leave reviews themselves or whatever. But it sounds like you're really good about actually leaving reviews, because that was the first thing you
I
said
try
too about
to.
the Chrome extension, like leave them a review. So
Yeah,
that's good.
now I have
Good
to
job,
check
man.
if I left the Liquify one a review. I think I did, but I'll
We're
need
just
to
gonna
double
assume that
check.
you did. We're just gonna assume you did. And even if not, you've got a couple of weeks before this goes live, so you can get it.
I definitely will have by then.
Nice.
Nobody's
All right, well, my pick. So I have a habit. I go to the grocery store a lot because it's walkable and feels like I live in a big city and I can walk to the grocery store. Plus, it gives me something to do with the aforementioned child in the stroller. Sometimes you'll just make a Kroger run, get some fresh grapes or milk, whatever. But when we go there, I always go down the discount aisle because there's one aisle. It happens to be diapers and stuff, but they have one small shelf on there where they put all like the discounted stuff. It could be stuff that's damaged or things that are about to expire or whatever. But I always sneak by because you never know. You might find some candy. You might find something useful, right? So the other day, they had these red bags of caramel corn called crack corn, crack with a K. And I thought, oh, I've had some really bad caramel corn in my day. I don't know if it's worth it, but it was like $1 per bag. Like, I'll get 2 bags just to see, Oh my goodness, guys. It was so good. It was the best caramel corn I've ever had. It literally is crack corn. So it's crackcorn.com. You need to check crackcornpopcorn.com. And it's super expensive unless you get it in clearance. I wish I would have bought all the bags because I'm never going to get it again. But yeah, it's really good. They got the texture and the softness and the mouthfeel. It's perfect.
I love how excited you get over snacks. Like you were.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
do get excited about snacks. Yeah.
Oh, it does look
Yeah.
delicious. Wow.
I'm telling you, try it out.
Let's see if I can get it in Canada.
I'll send you some to the underground.
Get the,
But-
what is the get the shipping, the duties, taxes, or whatever that y'all have to pay? I was so surprised. I had a friend of mine that lives in Canada that got one of the Shopify displays from Editions,
Yeah.
and even though it was free, he still had to pay like $40-some US,
Same.
basically. Yeah,
Same.
like that's insane to me. Like I forget like how lucky we are in the US to not have to like even think about some of that stuff or whatever. It was like that's a real bummer. It was like it's $40, or whatever was that. It's still a great deal realistically. So
That's my perspective too.
yeah.
Well, I think we'll end it there today. And thank you so much for joining us. And we will for
Yes,
sure
thank
have you back. And appreciate all the help you've been to us offline and online. Taylor, it's always good to see you. Let's make sure we coordinate again next week too about what we're going to wear because we got to keep this trend going. And to all of you listening, thanks for joining us. It's a long journey, but we appreciate you being on it with us and hope it was helpful. Good luck and code well. Goodbye.
Bye.
I need to work on these.